All right. Well, hey, it's that time again. The Lions are now on the clock to get down to 53. The 53-man roster. It is an annual tradition for these teams. It is a gauntlet of trying to go through each and every player that they feel is going to help them win this season. And I wanted to clarify a few things from this morning's morning show. So after I sat back and thought about all the players that we spoke about this morning, there's a couple of things that I didn't touch on. And one happened to be the new rule. So there's a new IR designation rule for the 2024 season, which your Detroit Lions are actually the team that helped implement this rule this season. And that I wanted to discuss first. So this year, the NFL is implementing a new rule that was actually proposed by the Lions. In short, a team may place two players on the injured reserve on the day of cutdowns, being Tuesday. And both of those players will be eligible to return after a minimum of 4 games. How does this help the Lions? How does it hurt the Lions? So with the fact that the Lions brought DJ Reader off, of the NFI list, he could end up back on IR to start the season. The more I think about it, it even makes a little bit more sense than the most recent post I put on Twitter. But we'll get to that. So previously, players that, if a player were to return in the same season, as they were placed on IR, they would have to make the initial 53-man roster. So that is where the defining transition is between last year and this year is now you don't have to make the 53-man roster. You can just be placed on IR, 2 spots, which then saves 2 spots on the 53-man roster. So this is huge. This is essentially a 4-player swing, if you want to look at it that way. Currently, the Lions have defensive end John Kaminsky and cornerback Emmanuel Moseley as the players that they chose for this new rule. Now, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I've explained it 6 ways from Sunday that Emmanuel Moseley is a huge risk. He has a torn pectoral. From what we know with DJ's injury from last season, he was out the whole season. He barely was able to come back and play in the playoffs. And albeit, Moseley got injured about 6 weeks before CJ did from last year, I would still say that that's a big and risky move for the Detroit Lions in a cornerback room that seems to be pretty deep the way that it is right now. It's going to be really hard for anybody to get snaps after Amik Robertson, Terrion Arnold, and Carlton Davis man the starting positions. Now, there is another thing to consider here. The Lions have a couple of other players who are candidates for the short-term IR stints, and those players would be Broderick Martin and safety Ifeatu Melifonwu, as both of these injuries are relatively unknown. We are not real sure the exact situation here on how long these players could be out. It's safe to assume that it's going to be more than a couple of weeks into the regular season, which does make sense then to put them both on the IR designation. If they allow those players to make the 53-man roster first, well, they were probably going to make the roster anyway. And that may or may not hinder what the Lions are trying to do here. So I want to roll through my final 53-man prediction. Some of these things could change, all depending on, the injury designations. But like I said, after a few moments of clarity this morning, after we finished the morning show, here are my final thoughts. And after expecting some, injury moves, with the potential change, and based on the new rule, like I said, teams can add 2 players to IR without having to make the initial 53 on Tuesday. And that's a big addition for this season. I am adding Broderick Martin and Ifeatu Melifonwu to those spots. I am removing John Kaminsky and Emmanuel Moseley from those designated spots. I feel like those are longer term potential for them not to return in 2024 anyway. So why put them on, a shorter term option or an option that would have them returning to the field, hopefully by week, 6 after the bye week, right? And so for the Lions, that's what they would be looking at, is getting them back by week 6. There's no real reason to sit here and waste these spots for Kaminsky. I mean, his knee issue is a year. He could come back for playoffs, but what's the likelihood that we're going to need Kaminsky in what is a very deep defensive line already? So here's what I wanted to throw at you. On the offense, I kept 22 players. I only kept 2 quarterbacks, Jared Goff and Hendon Hooker. Nate Sudfeld has just not shown enough over the last couple of seasons. And to be honest with you, what he showed this season in the preseason was not good. Now, you could place blame on the offensive line. I place blame on the quarterback. He just didn't look comfortable back there. He wasn't commanding of the offense. It just seemed a bit scattered at times. And to be honest with you, I would rather have Hendon Hooker, who's very young, and we plan on him and prepared for him to be somewhat scattered at times because he's still learning to make those mistakes. Nate Sudfeld has been in the league for 9 seasons. I would not expect for him to be making the mistakes that he is making. Running back room. So I kept 4 here. I don't think it's any secret. You can never have enough running backs, just like you can never have enough defensive backs. Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, Sione Vaki, and Craig Reynolds will round out the running back room to start for the Lions this season. Vaki and Reynolds primarily playing on special teams, and we've already seen what Vaki can do in the pass game as well as toting the rock. The kid is going to be electric. He's going to be able to get a few plays in here or there and potentially help this Lions team on offense. And he can be inserted on the defense in a pinch. So you have that versatility out of Sione Vaki that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell both love. Wide receiver room. The Lions, I have them keeping 5 this year. Now, they've traditionally kept 5 players each of the last 2 seasons. Last year, they kept 6 to a degree, if you want to count J-Mo, being on the suspension list, being counted as the 6th player that was, he was serving suspension, but they kept 5 additional players on top of J-Mo. This year, I got St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Khalif Raymond, Isaiah Williams. So undrafted free agent has probably been the most prolific wide receiver outside of, the top 3 that I just named that has played this preseason. And Isaiah Williams has done enough to earn a spot on this team. Now, the last position, I did give it to Donovan Peoples-Jones, and I'll explain why. Has he done enough this preseason to deserve it? Probably not. He's simply getting in by default because the Lions don't have anybody else they can trust right now. I firmly believe that they're going to be looking at the waiver wire and looking to see if they can add somebody to this team that can give them, a more dynamic feel to this wide receiver room. The Lions are definitely missing some size here. I would like to see a 6'2" or above wide receiver added to this room to give the Lions some depth on the boundary, someone that can go up and get the ball, chase those 50-50 balls if needed. And it's not a pass that Jared Goff likes to throw, but, sometimes it just happens. But getting a guy down in the end zone, working some corners, we just haven't had that style of a player on this team. Now, we do have Sam Laporta, who is basically a big receiver at this point, but the Lions are definitely thin at the bottom part of this roster. Speaking of tight ends, I did keep 3. So is where I thought that the Lions might keep 4 due to this new kickoff rule and trying to find players that can help in special teams, as well as give the Lions more depth and more options in the passing game. I still only kept 3 this year. Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, who just signed a nice deal recently, and Shane Zielstra, who seems to have bounced back from his injury from last season. On the offensive line, I am a big believer that you can never have enough offensive linemen, given what the Lions have gone through over the last few seasons. I mean, they've put 10, 11, maybe even 12 different offensive line sets into the game to start a game based on, the injuries that they've suffered over the last few seasons. It's kind of been musical chairs in the offensive line room. But this season, I just don't see a lot of depth that is worth sticking around. So for that reason, I only kept 8. Frank Ragnow, Penei Sewell, Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, Kevin Zietler. Those are your starting 5. To back them up, Kobe Sorsdal's kind of had a rough go at it this preseason, hasn't been extremely consistent. Coyote Ewosika actually has some experience from last year in the NFC Championship game that I think will bode well for him. And Giovanni Manu, I mean, he's the Broderick Martin of 2024. He's definitely a developmental player, someone that's going to take a little bit of time to get his feet underneath him, if you will. And I expect him to, really have a better 2025 than he will a 2024. But we need depth, and we're not going to give up a 3rd-round pick this early in the development of a young player. Making the NFI list, or continuing with the NFI list, is Christian Mahogany. He was out with an illness for multiple weeks. I don't see where the Lions are able to elevate him at this point or work him into the roster. It'd be best to leave him on the NFI list, where he should be able to come off of that list, when ready. is my understanding of the rule. Here is an option, though. Now, Dan Skipper has worked with the Lions in the past, at least from what I've read or I've understood in the past, where if you cut Dan Skipper, it's unlikely that he's going to go anywhere because it's up to him to go sign with a team. He is not forced to go sign with another team. And if Skipper has the, gentleman's handshake agreement that he's not going to sign with another team and that the Lions are going to bring him back, right now you could cut Skipper and allowing for that position to stay open, another roster spot to stay open, which would help the Lions navigate this flurry of injured reserve, and or looming cuts to players that could potentially be, Malcolm Rodriguez, a guy that we don't want to see, off this team. But at what point, do you have to walk away from some players? This is going to be that year. Ifeatu Melifonwu, and like I said earlier, Broderick Martin battling the IRR bug right now. This is not an easy situation for the Lions to be in. They have had a rash of injuries to a lot of their bottom end help and a lot of players that were supposed to be, or at least slated to be, their depth positions. If he could be longer term, if what we're understanding about, his issue, which would be his Achilles, that it's not ruptured, but it could be more of like a tendinopathy, tendinitis, type of situation, which honestly can last longer, never really fully heal and kind of linger throughout an entire season. So possibly they could keep Jamarco Jones in place. They could opt to retain Strickland as a safety. Ty Summers really broke out in this last game as a linebacker. And Beauplan, again, another player who was just recently added to this team, looked pretty good. So be interesting to see what the Lions try to do there. And then obviously they can make their moves and get through the rest of their cuts after Wednesday. So total offensive players 22. On the defensive side of the ball, we have defensive tackle Ali McNeil, Levi O, Mekhi Wingo, DJ Reader, who was just elevated and removed off of the NFI list, and Kyle Pecco. I think that this is a pretty dominant defensive line right now, but we still have a lot of unanswered questions. Broderick Martin potentially going to IR short term, so I don't have him right now as one of the top 5. He would obviously slide to IR, which would leave a spot open. But starting the season off with McNeil, and more than likely it's going to be Levi O and Pecco starting opposite of Ali McNeil's. DJ Reader probably won't be able to go week 1. I still feel like the Lions are looking or searching for another player here. But that may come in the days following all of the rest of the cuts throughout the NFL. The defensive end, another really deep position. I would hate to lose any of the players in this room right now. Traditionally, the Lions have kind of kept 5 or 7, defensive end or defensive tackles. They kind of flip-flop a little bit. The average number has always been 11, and that's what I went with. So Aiden Hutchinson, Marcus Davenport, clearly your starters. Josh Paschal, I think that this is his last hurrah, obviously, with the Lions to try to prove that he can play this game. There's no reason why James Houston should go anywhere. He is the most efficient player on this team. Isaac Ukwu has really shown out this preseason. There is just too much to love from that kid to allow him to walk right now. And then Matty Betts, man. Matthew Betts, whatever you guys want to call him, just call him his name, right? He has shown flashes and glimpses of the ability to be able to play at this level. I don't think that the work is done with him. And for that reason, I don't think that the Lions should walk away from him. He will not last on the waiver wire. That is for certain. So I'd like to see all 6 of these guys retained. And then in the linebacker room, so given the fact that you're probably going to be working a few of these players' angles with the IR, with Broderick Martin and Ifeatu Melifonwu, I have 7 linebackers that could potentially make this team. And there is an explanation as to why. So Alex Anzalone, Barnes, and Campbell are your starters. Mitchell Agudi has been slotted back as a outside linebacker. He also plays up on the line. And so that's kind of an interesting situation here for the Lions to be able to have more positional flexibility and versatility from Mitchell Agudi or Good. Jalen Reeves-Maybin signed a contract this offseason. He's clearly not going anywhere. And he's actually played no snaps in the preseason that I've seen. And then Ben Nyman. So I was really excited to see him added to this team this year. Carried over 1,300 snaps in special teams and is someone that is going to be able to be utilized quite heavily on the special teams unit and should give us plenty of production. His production as a middle linebacker during the preseason has been solid. So I'd like to see him stick around. And then Ty Summers, who just was added to the team in the last 10 days. exploded against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think he had like nine tackles, maybe 3 TFLs. No reason in the world why you should let a guy like that go. You don't have enough tape on him. You don't know enough about him. But now other teams have seen what he can do. He'll more than likely get picked up if you do let him walk. Now, Malcolm Rodriguez, he is my IR or cut candidate. There may not be enough room, for IR with Broderick Martin and Efetu Melifonwu, but Rodriguez, he's a smaller linebacker. He really didn't play much last year. He was utilized on the offense, as an H-back. Is utilized on special teams, but he really didn't record a ton of snaps last year. So I think the rope has kind of just run out, if you will, with Rodriguez. And there is some players now in this linebacker room that can play, and they're bigger, broader, faster linebackers that can give the Lions more opportunity to stay flexible. Now in the cornerback room, I'm keeping 6 here. I see where the Lions have developed a really deep corner room. DB room overall is looking phenomenal. You got Davis, Arnold, and Robertson as your starters. Now, Rakestraw and Dorsey probably have had 2 of the better preseasons on this team. Dorsey's been kind of a mixed bag. Amik Robertson was clearly the standout here this preseason, but Rakestraw and Dorsey had probably the better preseason as a whole for the guys in the bottom end of the roster. Fildor is one that I'm going to allow to stay on this roster for now. I haven't seen a ton from him, but what I have seen has been pleasant to watch. He is playing much better this season, which I expected. He's in a better room. You elevate your game around the guys around you, and that's good to see. I think that Fildor belongs, and to be honest, he's not going to get a ton of snaps. It's going to be hard for him to work his way onto the field, so he's primarily going to be a special teams player. In the safety room, because Efetu Melifonwu appears to be going to IR or at least some sort of list. Maybe he's added to the 53 and then redesignated later. I kept 4. I would love to have seen 5 safeties here, but keeping an extra linebacker did not allow that. So Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph would be your starters at this point, with Brandon Joseph, who's actually had a really good camp this year, good preseason. And CJ Moore coming back after serving his suspension last year for gambling. Haven't seen enough out of CJ yet, but the Lions are thin, and they need players that can back up and also play on special teams. So CJ Moore, by default, has to make this roster. That gives you a total of 28 defensive players. Specialists is pretty easy. You've got Jack Fox, Jake Bates, and then Daly as your long snapper on the practice squad. I could see where 14 out of 16 of these players could fill this squad right away. Now, there is some definite rules here that you have to follow with the practice squad. You can only have 10 players, or you have to have 10 players that must have 2 or fewer accrued seasons. And you can have no more than 6 players that have unlimited amount of seasons, or more than three or more seasons. You can keep a 17th player if they come from the International Pathway Program. I don't know of any Lions right now that are on that program. They usually do bring a few in every year, but I don't think that any of them are on that program at this point. I could be wrong. Jake Fromm, look, he clearly has the better arm and the better instincts over Nate Sudfeld. I know that Nate has been good with Jared Goff, so I'm just going to go ahead and say both of those guys make the practice squad right now. Jamar Jefferson, he showed flashes during the preseason. The Lions could always use an extra running back. And of course, when injuries happen, utilizing somebody for special teams, he'll be able to lend some help there. Parker Heast, I really wanted to find a way for him to make the roster. It is just very rare to have 4 tight ends and 4, tight ends that actually get a lot of playing time. He would probably just be a scratch every single week. So for that reason, I went with, another linebacker or a defensive tackle or a defensive end that will potentially have more opportunity. 3 wide receivers that I could see keeping. Darius Fountain, he's shown enough. He would be a veteran player, that could pretty much sign wherever he wants to sign. He doesn't have to stick with the Lions, but he has shown enough to where he could potentially get on the field later on throughout the season, depending on what happens, with injuries. Caden Davis and Jalon Calhoun, 2 guys that, again, they've had flashes, they've had glimpses that they can play this game. I would like to see them obviously have more work with Jared Goff. I think that part of the issue that the Lions have faced this year is Nate Sudfeld has just not been able to get anybody the ball. And when that happens, everybody else kind of fails because of it. So defensive tackle Chris Smith, again, just kind of sticking with the Lions that probably should get some more opportunity here, but we need depth. Linebacker Abraham Beauplan. This guy was a sneaky good addition to this team. Really, really excited about where he is right now as a baseline player. High ceiling. Definitely will do well with the developmental program that the Lions have. Stephen Gilmore, kind of a shock that he doesn't make the roster this year, but it is a thick roster. There's just no room. When you bring in, two draft picks, first, second round, and then two high, valued free agents, it doesn't leave a whole lot of room for you to make the roster here. So Stephen Gilmore getting stashed on the practice squad. I think there's an opportunity for him to do that. He's been there before. And then safety, Lauren Strickland. He's had a great camp, a couple of good preseason games. Still potential for him to make this roster. So we'll see where it goes. Now, depending on what Dan was supposed to say today, there was supposed to be a press conference. Didn't see it. I was hoping that there was going to be one with some injury updates. But it looked like the Lions removed it at the last minute. So no updates as of right now for anything. The Lions have not made any cuts. And that's where we are right now at 1 p.m. on Monday, August 26th. So that's all for this video. Appreciate you guys joining me today. Don't forget to join the memberships. Hit the join link and get involved in the Greatest Lions chat. There's a whole host of different options and perks that you guys get for joining the Rocked On Detroit Lions memberships. And please do us a favor and like and subscribe to the channel. We could definitely use your help getting us to 10,000 this year. That is our goal. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Go Detroit Lions. One pride as always. We'll see you in the next one.